The chart looks flat for years. Then, all at once, it doesn't. Everyone's heard that compounding is powerful. Almost nobody actually feels that in their gut in year 3 when the number in the account looks basically the same as it did in year 1. That gap between knowing it and feeling it is the whole problem tonight. Card. A simple compound growth curve animating slowly and almost imperceptibly for several seconds, then suddenly curving sharply upward. This one's a little different from the last few episodes. We've mostly been diagnosing why the herd does what it does: loss aversion, status quo bias, the pull to follow the crowd. Tonight's about something you can actually build, not just recognize. Compounding is the first real wealth-building tool in this series, and it comes with its own, very specific psychological trap. Here's the shape of it in plain terms. Money that earns a return doesn't just grow, it grows on its own growth. Year 1's gains earn their own gains in year 2. It sounds small when you say it like that. For a long time it looks small too. Put a real number on it, purely as a hypothetical illustration, not a projection or a promise. $10,000 growing at a hypothetical 7% a year. After 5 years, it's worth about $14,000, up 40%, which already feels like a while to wait for less than half again as much. After 10 years, it roughly doubles to about $19,700. But sit with what happens next. By year 20, that same $10,000 is worth almost $39,000. By year 30, over $76,000, more than 7 times the original amount, without adding another dollar. The first 10 years and the last 10 years are the same 7%, applied the same way. They just don't feel the same at all from inside year 3. That's not a flaw in the math, that's just what the early part of an exponential curve looks like from the inside. The problem is, you don't live on a chart. You live in the flat part of the curve, year after year, watching almost nothing visibly change, while your own brain is built to weight the present far more heavily than some distant future payoff. We call that present bias. $1 of visible progress today just feels more real than a much bigger dollar of invisible progress a decade from now. This isn't just a label for a feeling, it's a specific, well-studied pattern in decision-making research. Economist David Laibson formalized it in 1997 in a paper called Golden Eggs and Hyperbolic Discounting, published in the Quarterly Journal of Economics. His key finding: people don't just discount the future evenly the way a simple interest rate would. They discount it unevenly, heavily in the short term, much more gently further out, which produces a strange, specific kind of flip. Ask someone to choose between a smaller reward now and a much larger reward in a year, and plenty of people will patiently choose to wait. Ask that same person to choose between a smaller reward today and a larger reward tomorrow, and the pull toward taking it today gets dramatically stronger, even though the actual gap in time is the same one day either way. It's not that people can't value the future. It's that the pull of right now gets disproportionately loud the closer now actually is. Laibson's own follow-up work connected this directly to savings behavior. One explanation for why people save less than they say they intend to isn't that they don't value their future self, it's that easier access to their own money keeps reopening the exact moment where hyperbolic discounting wins. Try this on yourself for a second, the way researchers actually test this in a lab. Would you rather have $100 today or $110 tomorrow? A lot of people take the $100 today. That 10% bump for one day of waiting doesn't feel worth it. Now change the frame. Would you rather have $100 30 days from now or $110 31 days from now? Same extra day, same 10% bump. But now almost everyone picks the bigger number and waits the extra day because 30 days out, one more day barely registers. The math didn't change, only how close today was to the decision changed. That's the whole mechanism behind why quitting compounding in year 3 feels so different from quitting it in year 15. The pull of the immediate is not a constant. It's strongest exactly when you're standing closest to it. So people quit in the flat part, not because the strategy failed, because the strategy, by design, doesn't show you much of anything until you've already stayed long enough for it to matter. And staying that long, with no visible proof it's working, is a genuinely hard thing to ask of a brain that's built to want evidence now. This isn't just a theory about how people would probably behave. It shows up every year in actual investor data. Morningstar publishes an annual study called Mind the Gap, comparing what a fund actually earned to what the average dollar invested in that fund actually earned. The difference comes from investors buying after a fund has already gone up and selling after it's already gone down, timing their money around their own emotions instead of the calendar. Over the 10 years ending in 2024, Morningstar found the average dollar earned about 7% a year, while the funds themselves earned about 8.2%. Investors capturing roughly 85% of the return that was sitting right there for anyone willing to just leave it alone. I want to be careful with that number, the same way I've been careful with claims in past episodes. Researchers genuinely disagree about how much of that gap is really bad timing versus a side effect of how dollar-weighted returns get calculated when money keeps flowing in and out of a fund. But even the more skeptical researchers aren't arguing the gap is zero. They're arguing about how much of it is instinct and how much is math. Either way, the direction of the finding matches exactly what present bias predicts. Staying still is harder than it looks from the outside, and a lot of real money gets left on the table by people reacting to a chart instead of ignoring it. This is exactly the same instinct we talked about with loss aversion a few episodes back. Your brain isn't weighing the full, true picture. It's weighing what's immediately emotionally available to it. Compounding asks you to trust a future you can't yet see, using a part of your brain that was built almost entirely to respond to what you can see right now. And it isn't only individual investors who struggle with this. Professional fund managers whose entire job is picking better investments than the market average run into a related version of the same wall. S&P Dow Jones Indices has published something called the SPIVA scorecard every year for over 2 decades, tracking how many actively managed funds actually beat their benchmark index. As of year-end 2024, over the trailing 20-year period, roughly 92% of U.S. equity funds underperformed their benchmark. Not a bad year. 20 years. The pattern gets more lopsided the longer you measure it, not less, which is itself telling. It's much easier to look clever for a quarter, or even a couple of years, than to consistently outguess a market for 2 decades running. Boring, unglamorous, stay-the-course index investing isn't the strategy of people who couldn't figure out anything better. For most people, including most professionals, It's the strategy that's actually left standing after enough time has passed to see who was right. Here's why the flat years matter so disproportionately. Picture two people, each putting $200 a month into the exact same investment at a hypothetical 7% average return. One starts at 25 and stops contributing at 65, 40 years. The other starts at 35 and does the same thing to 65. So the discipline here isn't really a financial skill, it's a patience skill applied to money. And patience skills get easier when you stop relying on willpower and start relying on structure. Automatic contributions, a long-time horizon you've decided on in advance, and as little day-to-day checking of the balance as you can manage. The less often you look at the flat part of the curve, the less often you're tempted to abandon it. 30 years, 10 years less. The first person contributes $96,000 of their own money over that time. The second contributes $72,000. Not a huge difference, about a third less. But the first person's account is worth roughly $525,000 at 65. The second person's is worth about $244,000. Less than a third less in contributions turns into less than half the ending balance. That's not luck, and it's not a better strategy. It's 10 extra years sitting in the flat part of somebody else's curve, quietly doing almost nothing, right up until it wasn't nothing at all. What that actually looks like in practice isn't complicated, even if it isn't easy. Set up the contribution to happen automatically on a schedule, so staying invested doesn't require a decision every single month. It just requires not canceling something that's already running. Pick your time horizon in advance, in writing if you have to, before the flat part of the curve has a chance to talk you out of it. The same way it's easier to commit to a diet before you're standing in front of the food. And seriously consider checking your balance less often than you think you should. Watching a flat line every single day doesn't give you more information. It just gives your present bias more chances to argue with your future self. None of this removes the temptation to quit in year 3. It just makes quitting require an active decision instead of something that happens by default the moment you glance at a number that hasn't moved. I'm not going to tell you a number or a timeline or a specific return you should expect. Anyone who does that with confidence is telling you more than they actually know. What I'll tell you is this. The version of you who quits in year 3 and the version of you who's still there in year 15 are looking at the exact same flat-looking chart. Only one of them is right about what it becomes. Slow is a strategy. Panic never is. If the flat part of your own curve has you second-guessing yourself, this is your reminder to stay boring. Subscribe for the next episode.